Hello, everyone. I'm Frederic Gomer, partner at B2G, and I'm extremely pleased to be here today to host the ISCA Pledge Day. So today I have Hélène Udreau and Brett Marshall. So they are our guests today, and I would like to have a conversation with you about the challenges, the issues, the struggles, but also the success stories that you have in making your respective supply chains sustainable. Is that possible?
Of course.
So I don't know if my team warned you, but in this area, we talk about real stuff, real meat. Sorry for the vegetarians listening to us, but I want to have the real deal. All right? So let's start. You and I, I think somehow we are in the same age group, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. But we haven't been in a situation where, in the end, sustainability has been something very important. I'm thinking about myself, and my kids are very different. So it means that it has always been a topic which was a debate at the society level, but not at the corporate level. Today, we're having a lot of conversations in the corporate world about how to make what we do, our operation, especially in supply chain, more sustainable. So let's start. Hélène, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Sure.
And then
Thank you, Fred, and thanks for the opportunity, by the way. So I'm Hélène Hudrooks. I've been with Schneider nearly 9 years now. And my current role is I look after customer delivery experience. So I'm not in sustainability as such, but it's just to show you also that at Schneider, we don't need to be necessarily in a sustainability role to talk about sustainability. What we do at Schneider is we are selling products and solutions to our customers for them to support them to become more sustainable. So, of course, within our supply chain, what does it mean? It means that we really want to be, a very good best practice for our customers, but also with our suppliers. I would say that what's important is this role is also linking very strongly with customers on a regular basis. So I help the team to specialize the supply chain based on each of our customer persona. So at Schneider, we sell to different customers, a big variety of different customers. And we really want to bring that differentiated supply chain to each of those persona.
Perfect. That's exactly what I want to hear. And that's a good transition because we've been talking about quality in the same way. Quality has been something which has been separate to everything else. But in the end, everybody should do quality. Over to you, Brett.
Well, funny you should talk about quality because that's, as you know, my area of responsibility. I'm the Vice President of Quality and Health, Safety, Security and the Environment for Zuellig Pharma. I think my interest in sustainability probably started with some of the conversations that I had at the breakfast table with my daughter. And she had the ability to be able to drive my interest and make me aware of my level of responsibility. And I joined the dots exactly the same way you did. I thought my area of responsibility is quality, and quality is everybody's responsibility. And it's the same with sustainability. So I'm kind of lucky with the role that I have. If maybe I just set a bit of context, we as an organisation conducted a materiality assessment with our organisation back in about 2015 and identified 22 material issues, which we then put into 4 specific pillars. Those pillars were improving health outcomes, nurturing talent, respecting the environment, and also setting the highest standards of integrity. And a number of those material issues sit in areas that I have responsibility for. So quality looks after product integrity and product safety for patients. It's also how we reach remote areas with products that have their efficacy assured. It's how we act against counterfeit products that are entering the markets and increasing rates of cargo theft, how we prevent events of that nature. In the health and safety space, obviously the health of our employees, the mental wellness of our employees, workers' rights, human rights, the activities that we conduct with some of our suppliers that we'll probably talk a bit more about later. And then also helping health systems and enabling health systems. I think that was one of the great lessons out of the pandemic, was that we have a really key responsibility to help build health systems in the countries that we operate. So there's a number of touch points, and I'm pleased that I'm able to kind of support the corporate direction, what we want to do in sustainability, but also enabling the people in my teams and our broader corporate team to be a part of this journey.
That's great. And I think the reason why I invited you today is I didn't want to have any sustainable guru. I wanted to have leaders in your respective environment talking about sustainability and how it affects your day-to-day job. Actually, that's what is most important to me. So, how have you seen the transformation of sustainability, the sustainability topic across your position, across your organization? Has it come from the top management? Has it come from some other environment? So can you give us a little bit some insight about that? Maybe Hélène, you can comment on that.
Yes, sure. So I think it came from various areas. Of course, our customers are more and more inclined to work with partners and suppliers who are really on the sustainability area. So we can see that shift happening even stronger there. We saw it a bit less, I would say 5-10 years ago, where we wanted to push some initiative and it would not necessarily take. But now we can see, and they even are really on the demand side.
So you see a strong push
before.
from the customers today in terms of sustainability, or do you still think that you need, in some sectors, it depends as well, there's a level of education, mainly in FMCG, because the consumer, they want cost, but also they want to have a better quality product, more sustainable products at the same time. So is it coming on really on the customer telling you, okay, guys, you need to do something on my product. I want to buy more sustainable products. Or is it also part of your responsibility to educate as well your customer base?
I think both.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I probably will answer a lot of those questions on both ways. It's always a delicate balance. So you would see through the various customers we operate with, you would have, for example, an electrician who we don't sell direct to. But the electrician, and especially the younger generation, are asking for products with green material, with less plastic usage, etc. So you can see it coming from also us as consumer. That's also driven there. And you were talking about your daughter, the new generations, etc. So they are entering the workforce and they're also driving those initiatives. But then you also see larger corporations who have also targets in terms of sustainability, and they're really willing to partner with us. And more larger corporations also are wholesalers or distributors, groups that are a bit on the larger side, really wants to shift the needle there.
Sure. When I grew up, my parents used to tell me to turn off the lights for economical reasons. Today, my kids are telling me to turn off the light for sustainable reasons.
That's true.
So give me a break.
Exactly.
So what's the situation on your side, Brett?
I think probably the initial impetus for us was that many of our clients, and I should probably distinguish at this point between clients and customers. So clients are our upstream partners that are providing product, and we're performing, services
The B2B.
and solutions on their part. Yeah. And then customers are the hospitals, pharmacies, drugstores, medical centres, doctors, etc.
You do have consumers as well.
Not so much direct consumer
Okay.
at the moment. It mainly goes through, there's a little bit, but mainly through institutions. So I think sustainability started to become a qualifier with some of our clients, especially those out of Europe. And I think it reached kind of a nexus where we thought it's about time we structured ourselves in a better way to respond to the questions and the information and the data that we were being able to or being asked to prepare, and that was usually because there was organisations like EcoVadis and those types of things that were gathering data and providing it for client assessments. So we started to put some structure around that, and I mentioned the materiality assessment that we did. We have a very strong corporate support, so there's a subcommittee on the board, and the messaging comes down through the CEO, through the executive leadership team. We do have a sustainability team, but they're supported by the balance of the business. So those 4 pillars that I talked about, improving health outcomes, nurturing talent, respecting the environment, and setting the highest standards of integrity, each has a pillar lead. And then within those pillars, there's the material issues that have leads as well. So my role is as part of managing product integrity and safety, but I'm also involved in diversity, equity and inclusion on the side of, I'm a lead for cross-generational communication. So there's a very clear structure that's been established by the organisation. It has been pushed down. There's a number of initiatives that we've driven from kind of top down, but I think there's a growing awareness that we need to enable the other parts of the organisation to support some aggressive targets that are being set. You know, we're setting for ourselves and our clients are setting as well. So it will become it is an organisational objective, but it will become more of a people-motivated objective, I think, with our organisation.
Sure. So how do you become more sustainable? Because in the end, I mentioned the example of turning off the light, so it's an easy one. But we didn't grow up with sustainable practices, sustainability expertise. So how do you make sure that I think the targets are clear on carbon emissions, but that's on one side of the equation, because as you mentioned, Brett, there are many more topics related to sustainability, and sustainability is a fairly complex topic.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure that yourself, but also your teams, are at the right level to make sure that what they do can make an impact in terms of their knowledge, their expertise? How do you grow your respective team?
I think it also, what Brett said before on the quality, it's also a mindset and a culture shift. But also back, and really strongly linked to the question you asked before, it's also coming from the top in terms of setting up the strategies, making sure that we really want to make an impact. And at Schneider, we launched this new impact program where we really want to make sure that the P for impact stands for purpose. And the purpose of the company, of our employees, is around sustainability and ensuring we are operating in the most sustainable way, again, through the whole value chain, suppliers, partners, customers. And I think what's really, really important is to drive that culture, but also educate. So, for example, at Schneider, we have what we call the Sustainability Ambassador Program. So they can be from supply chain, but also from any other area. But we train the teams to be really understanding well the priorities we have on sustainability, internally for what we want to do, but also externally, what's happening, what are the trends, where we are heading if we're not doing something different.
So what do they do on a daily basis, those ambassadors? So
they have a normal job, of course, but they are ambassadors who are
because I wanted to apply if it was just that.
You should. They are advocating for sustainability in all areas of the business. So like champion, if I may say. They also can conduct training. So there are several levels of certification. So it's, as I said, it's an internal program. And we have also part of that program, we've opened it to our customers. So a portion of this program is also open to our customers. So our customers and their teams can also attend, our suppliers as well. So it's a movement that we started internally that we're expanding also externally through training. And of course, we've increased a lot the sustainability area. So we have some consulting services as well to support our customers. So here we've seen a lot of newer graduates, but also newer employees coming with that type of education, which really bring different ideas into the mix.
when you're a large organization, I think you have somehow a duty to make sure that you can. I'm going to use the terminology educate. It might sound might comes in the wrong way, but the entire value chain, which includes the customers, but also the suppliers, because they may not have the same level of maturity. That's also important, I think, to make sure that you include them. And if we look at the Scope 3 emissions, which are the emissions which are mainly coming from your partners, it's important for them to be aware of what is their impact on your own supply chain and in terms of sustainability. So, can you give us, Brett, some examples of what has been done in terms of initiatives? And also, I would like to understand the journey, what didn't work well, how did you adjust to that? And for our audience to understand a little bit better, it's usually organizations, they are no short of ideas, initiatives, projects, but then the key question is at the end, what's the impact of it?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. And I think, when we talk about pharma distribution and the fact that there's a lot of environmental temperature control for 98% of the products, so it is a very large energy consumption kind of operation. And I think that's kind of the first step in where we initiate projects around the infrastructure that we construct, how we can manage the cooling capabilities of our facilities more effectively. So changing the gas constituents in the aircon units, the insulation materials that we're using in the cold rooms that we construct, the power generation and the renewable energy opportunities that we have with solar panels and also renewable energy sources and how we can link those together. I think also around the temperature maintenance of product during delivery, so the special types of packaging that we use. Historically, mainly a styrofoam box and ice gel kind of combination, and replacing those with more high-tech solutions for which provide longer temperature maintenance and are also incredibly stronger in terms of reuse. And that opens up opportunity. So we first implemented this type of packaging in Vietnam, whereas we had previously shipped a lot of temperature-sensitive product, vaccines, oncology products via air between our branches in Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi. The introduction of this packaging allowed us to switch to road, and we were able to dramatically reduce the amount of styrofoam that we were using, dramatically reduce the carbon consumed in air shipments, and the packaging allowed us the additional time to get from Ho Chi Minh to Hanoi. We've since rolled out that type of packaging across more markets. We've reduced something like 300,000 styrofoam boxes from our operations. We still have about 300,000 styro boxes in our operations today, but our target is within the next 12 months to remove those as much as possible. There are some exceptions, but so the packaging side of things, I think the delivery to customers is also an area that we're looking at. We are looking at opportunities for electric vehicles, but the infrastructure probably needs further development in most of the markets we operate. So we have worked with e-bikes and small e-vehicles. We've got an order for some larger electric vehicles to go into Taiwan towards the end of this year. Part of that is also because customers don't allow us to keep our vehicles running when we're delivering to especially large hospitals. So to be able to maintain temperature, then we need a different type of technology, and electric vehicles help us in that respect. So there's some of the areas that we've implemented projects and made changes. Waste management is another area for us. There's a lot of packaging, different packaging constituents that we use that we're looking at potentials to recycle and reuse as well.
So those are very practical, concrete examples. So how do you choose your battles? Because the ocean is so wide. I mean, you can start anywhere, and in some cases, some companies are a bit lost to decide where they should start. So how did you decide which topics would make an impact, and how do you select? How do you prioritize?
I think that's a great question. I think one of the things we realised fairly early in the journey was that nobody really starts from scratch. There are always initiatives and opportunities that the organisation has already stepped into that actually contribute to more sustainable business practices. And I think that was kind of what we looked at as well. In terms of project selection, it was really a balance of the financials and the cost. The packaging solution I talked about wasn't just it was a significant investment. It was a multi-million-dollar investment, but the ROI finished up being much faster than we ever thought would occur. So we look at the opportunities for cost efficiency and cost improvement as well. But there are areas that we know are going to be expensive to change, and I think that's one of the areas where we're starting to look at how do we develop kind of carbon costing frameworks that we can use within the business for some of the financial decisions that we need to take and some of the projects that we have to embed sustainability as we embed quality and supply management and those sorts of things into major projects going forward.
So, Hélène, on your side at Schneider Electric, how do you manage the profitability aspects versus the sustainability? In the end, I mean, companies, they have to make money, and let's be clear. But it doesn't mean that they have to make money anyhow, anyways. It has to be in a sustainable way. So how do you make sure that, and it's usually when we talk about, as you mentioned it rightfully, Brett, when we talk about sustainability, it's a synonym of cost, investment, not necessarily immediate return on investment. So how do you balance those two aspects?
Yeah, so I believe what's been really done in the last few years is also looking at the type of material we're using and the way we're manufacturing our products from the start. So more and more now, the investment has been on developing in the R&D side green material that would be raw material we put inside our product. So yes, it's an investment, but we make sure that it's embedded into the cost of our product. And we also think about what are the next steps and the circularity of those products down the chain. So about 50% now of our material for new products being designed are there. They've been changed in the last few years, so which has been a very, very good investment in the long run. And as I said, it's after the end of the life of the product that we also see the benefit there. Because for us, the products are not going to be biodegradable, right? They are a big ensemble made of plastic. So we make sure those plastic, for example, are green material from the start. In terms of, back also to your question, making sure that, for example, we invest with some suppliers, we partner with suppliers and R&D, for example, for packaging. Similarly, it's also an investment because potentially single-use plastic might cost a little bit less than something that is biodegradable or something that is more sustainable as a solution. But as I said, it's part of our journey, and it's something that we want to compromise because that's our story. That's our mission is really to be sustainable, and that needs to be translated into our supply chain.
That's great. We've been through a lot since COVID, it seems. And we were focused mainly on resilience. I've never heard that word so many times in so many different places. And somehow I'm not sure, but that's probably something that I would like to hear from you. The sustainability topic has been less present, less important. It was still in the background, but resilience, meaning making sure that the company can actually respond quickly to a crisis, to a disruption, especially when we talk about supply chain, has been more predominant as a key topic. So where do we stand now in this era where we are right after COVID? Is it still coming, sustainability is coming as a top priority, or is it competing with other priorities such as resilience?
I think it's very much, it remains very much a topic of discussion. Even, at ASEAN levels and APAC levels, we're seeing a lot of regulation coming out of Europe that's influencing or will continue to influence companies, even in this region, and the US also is legislating. So I think there is a continuing impetus in that respect. I think resilience and sustainability can go hand in hand, and there's a really good example. I think we've seen a shift in the pharma industry for movement of product, especially out of Europe, from air freight to sea freight. And part of that is cost, but in association with that shift, you see a massive reduction in carbon consumption and the greenhouse gas footprint. You see a substantial reduction in risk because there's no in-transit kind of cross-airport movements of product in high temperatures that was traditionally a risk area for pharma products. So that's really provided continuity of supply, which is resilience, but in a more sustainable way. And I think, you touched earlier on quality, where we talked about there is the concept of quality by design, and I think what Alan was suggesting too is that we're getting to a point where it's sustainability by design as well. And so these concepts are being built in right from the very concept stage, which I think is important. I think also when you look at the healthcare systems in the markets that we operate, I think that the pandemic drove a much stronger awareness of how the governments and the public health sector is looking after, its community. And I think that they, in many of the markets we operate, they partnered with organisations like ours to build out their capability to move products safely, move vaccines safely to patients. But I think there's also a very definite program and strategy of many markets to ensure that capability continues to develop, and that they need to continue to enable the supply chain capabilities of the public sector as well. And I think that's where, there's great opportunities for the private sector and the public sector to collaborate. And I've been a part of a couple of projects in that nature. So I think there really is quite a strong correlation between sustainability and resilience if we think about it in that way.
Yeah, if I can echo, I think I echo there as well. Of course, you would make the shortcut of I need to air freight more because I have a crisis and I want to be more resilient and I want to deliver faster, etc. So that configuration we looked at also through network modeling. So looking at, we have 153 factories in the world, about 60 distribution center. How we make sure that we're bringing the right product at the right time closer to the customer? Yeah. How do we make sure also our manufacturing footprint is organized better in a more regional way? And this has been a continuous effort even before COVID times. But I think what COVID made and the supply chain crisis around semiconductor, what it made us realize is that we need to be much faster in regionalizing our supply chain. So what we have also a program called Power of Two, so making sure we have dual sourcing. We have, just to give you a bit of a range and an idea, we have 100,000 references over 5 different businesses. So Of course, the number of suppliers, the number of components is huge. So how do we make sure that the power of supply that we have is going to make the benefit and reduce at the same time the sustainability by bringing the product closer to the customers, to their end game, but also bringing their supply, their components, etc., along the way. So it's the whole chain, as you said before.
So when you make decisions, which sustainable or sustainability indicators are you looking at, especially when you have a vast supply chain organizations across the world and you have to deliver the customer? I mean, you're close to the customer, so you know what I'm talking about. So which indicators do you take into consideration to decide, okay, there's the service level, and whatever the service level may mean, it's making sure that the customer is happy in the end, whether it's cost, whether it's speed, whether it's responsiveness, but at the same time is how sustainable the entire chain is. And sustainable, there are different forms about the sustainability as well. So what do you look at, and what do you incorporate in your decision-making process?
So the very obvious one is, of course, the CO2 emission. And also what we've been looking at is the Science-Based Target Initiative, so SBTi. So that's also what is being measured on a regular basis. Of course, we have, with our suppliers, etc., we still need to build some of this information with them. But just to give you a bit of an idea, we launched a program with our suppliers, our top 1,000 suppliers, called the Net Zero Project. And
what is it about?
So it's basically about measuring and helping them to measure their carbon emissions. And we also gave them access to our EcoStruxure, which is a platform for them to support them on reducing and controlling and measuring their emissions. And we were able to gather 94% of our suppliers came back with a number. So of course, you could argue that is the measure accurate? Of course, we are all in this journey, but we had very, very good results on the accuracy of what they sent us. And the fact that they would really be willing to participate straight away without necessarily questioning it. So it's been very impressive to see that all our value chain is really sensible to that. And we have measure, of course. And that, like everywhere, right? Even regulation, the measure are changing quite often. So it's a journey, but it's a quite positive journey so far.
Good. So not being directly involved into sustainability topics, I mean, it's everywhere, but you're not the chief sustainable officer of your respective organizations. What are the lessons, or what is the top lesson that you've learned from the beginning when the sustainability has become a topic coming from the top management throughout the different initiatives that you implemented? So what will be the lesson that you would, if you have to reflect back on what has been done from your team, from yourself, or from the management? What would that be, Brett?
I think that it's there are many ways that we can contribute to what we want to achieve in terms of targets for sustainability. And every one of us has the capability to be involved in that process. You know, I think as you become more aware of the opportunities and the consequences, then, you know, it leaves you with a much stronger motivation to become involved in the process. And I think that's what we've experienced as well, that, you know, there's a much broader population of people who are engaged in looking to how we can make change. How can we reduce our greenhouse gases? How can we reduce our carbon footprint? How do we introduce efficiencies into our operation that support, you know, sustainable objectives? And it's everybody's responsibility, you know, to be a part of that journey. That's probably my biggest learning from the.
And do you think that sustainability has made your organization better? I'm not talking necessarily about philosophical aspects, but concretely in terms of efficiency, in terms of understanding. The big topic, the big challenge in sustainability is also understanding what your suppliers are doing whether they do it in the right way,
Yeah.
and having the visibility across the supply chain. So has it brought any additional benefits as well?
I think so. I think it's opened up the opportunity to collaborate in these areas with clients, which I think is really important. And I think it's also created opportunities, as Alan has talked about, the work that Schneider have done with their suppliers is something that's we're experiencing too. That we have. It's not really telling them what to do. It's getting them involved in the same learning process that we've been through, and encouraging them that they can make and contribute to our targets in the same way, with initiatives that they can implement that aren't going to cost them a lot of money. Many of them are small companies, and so they feel a little bit insecure when you start the dialogue with them. But it's really shifting from not just responsible sourcing, but to responsible supplier management, where you're talking about quality, you're talking about health and safety, you're talking about workers' rights. And, these are the dialogues that you build into your conversation. So it's not just, a price per carton anymore. It's okay. Yes, we need to move from A to B, but there's a lot more discussion that needs to take place about how we do that.
And I think I would echo what you said, Brett, and it adds as well to their own value proposition with other customers of theirs. I would say the important one that I can really see is how to attract talent. So if you show and demonstrate that your core strategic initiatives are around sustainability, you will retain and also attract talent, because it's really, really important in a shifting world like we are currently. We see so many different skills that you need. So we need to make sure we retain the good talent. And I think having a mission and demonstrating and walking the talk is very, very important to retain those very good employees that we want to keep.
So how do you avoid to fall into the trap of doing a lot of sustainability topics, because it brings benefits on the customer side, on the talent as well? And you have also to make sure that whatever initiative you put in place is also very much aligned with the DNA of the organization. So our company can also make sure, okay, we are doing too much here, and actually doesn't really resonate with what we are and what we do. But at the same time, that's something which is important for us. So we need to focus on that and make sure that who we are is being understood. We know the millennials are very much sensitive about sustainable topics, about also having a sense of purpose for the organization that they work with, which was not the case necessarily for the younger or older generations. So yes, and I know there's a lot of greenwashing topics that we see sometimes, and I can understand because there's a lot of pressure, and it makes sense to be sustainable today. So how can we, and that's a very open question, how can we avoid this
Yeah,
trap?
so the strategic initiative that we launched actually starting this year for the next 5 years, we call it Impact, and the dedicated pillars on the supply chain is planet, people, customers, and performance. And we need to balance that out. So meaning that we have project and initiative driven at global level, relayed at regional level on those 4 pillars. So it's not just planet everywhere. And I would also go back to the ambassador topic I told you about. It's not everybody who's looking after sustainability, but we make sure we are adding sustainability topics through our champions. We also have champions that are around customer centricity in our supply chain. So it's really finding the right balance. We also have our performance team that is really making sure that we are on track for all our KPIs, including sustainability, but also service level, cost to serve, etc. So we're making sure that all is equally looked at.
I think it can't be a topic which is isolated. It has to be part of the organization's mission, which is, as you said, there are several pillars, and performance is one of it as well, of course. But we have seen that we can also be sustainable and make money in the end. So, yeah. On your side, Brett, how do you see it?
I think we've just been through an exercise revisiting the materiality issues that we identified, from the first strategic phase that we had, and it's given us the opportunity to reflect on the areas that we worked on. There's not much change actually in the space of coming up for sort of 7 or 8 years. The themes are still pretty solid. And I think it's also, again, to take Alan's point, that, how you bring your people into that conversation, how you ensure that you've got engagement in the organisation, which is a much broader topic, but an important part of engagement is, showing that you accept the responsibility and you're demonstrating that. I think 80%, we had a look at some numbers, and about 80% of the new hires we had, one of the hygiene factors for them was, our stance on sustainability. So it's incredibly important in recruiting talent, but also retaining talent, as you touched on, Frederick.
Yeah, good. I think that's an important aspect. Retention of talent is key nowadays. There's a scarcity, especially in most topics. Today, supply chain is one of them. Sustainability. When we get into the sustainability aspects in various functions, because it's not just as such a topic which is isolated, it makes it much more difficult to not only attract the right talent, but also make sure that whenever we have someone on board, they stay in the long run, and they stay because what they see, it's not only just sweet talk, but also what they see in actions are aligned with what they are expecting as well. So that's an important aspect. I wanted to discuss to take it to another angle in terms of innovation. You talked about R&D to some point. You talked about involving the suppliers. How sustainability is somehow pushing you in terms of barriers in creating, getting in places that you were not able to be prior, because it's tough to be sustainable. But at the same time, you have to be creative enough to identify new ways of doing better with less as well, if we talk about materials. So does it also benefited you in terms of innovation? Is that a topic which you can directly correlate?
I would say yes. I think, we talked about single-use plastics earlier, and obviously from a packaging perspective, that's an issue for us. It's an area that we've continued to work on. But sustainable packaging solutions that have water resistance, as an example, are quite challenging to find, and certainly on the scale and the volume that we would use them, it's also pretty tricky. We looked at some of the existing solutions. We worked with one of the institutions here in Singapore, Republic Polytechnic, who, as one of their student projects, had a look at the permeability of some of the materials that we were looking at, trying to identify, material that we may be able to use longer term, scale up, have produced, at the scalable requirement, but haven't quite got there yet. It's been a bit of a challenge, and some of the other materials that we've tried, you talked earlier about, or asked earlier about what works and what doesn't. This was something that kind of hasn't worked so well, because we've found products that can be potentially corrosive, products that create dust that's irritant to the skin, and some of the products have quite unpleasant perfumes or odours and those sorts of things. So this is not an easy area to solve, but it will take innovation to drive the type of solution that we need, and to drive it to scalable production capabilities as well.
Yeah, so I won't cover on the packaging because similarly, we need to partner as well to get to different level of packaging. But I think the by design, the green material that we put inside of our product is really where the teams have been trying to innovate as much as possible from the design, but also even on the manufacturing areas. But something I'd like to touch on is a bit more on the soft skills part, meaning that we with the crisis, we were able to do things differently, much faster, digitize processes that we thought would take a few years to do, where we did it in a few months. So I think it's also the innovation mindset. And we are taking also, as part of the program, we are taking a different way. We call it catalyst leadership. So we are just starting on this journey, actually. The training I will take is next week. So I can tell you more, Fred, in a
So we have
over coffee.
some premier information.
Yes, but it's also bringing and making sure we generate innovation. We give the space even more. We do today already, but even more to our teams to collaborate, to work in squads, to not work in, within their team. And so really, I think I'm really excited by that aspect, because this is going to be part of our strategy for the next 3 years. So mindset,
Yes.
Training, and fostering innovation as much as we can.
So where do you see your respective organization in terms of sustainability, and where are you not there yet? Where do you want to do more? Where do you, when you go back to the office in the morning, you take your chai tea latte, and then you reflect and you say, okay, this is a topic where we need to do a little bit more.
Well, I would say, single-use plastic, we have done so much, but we should do even more, more aggressive, much more aggressive. By end of 2025, we should be there, but I feel like we should be much faster. It's just right in front of us,
So what's preventing you of getting there? Is it expertise? Is it knowledge? Is it the leadership push? What is it?
Yeah, so I would say bill of material changes, master data, and as I said to you, right, we have 273,000 stock keeping unit that we sold last year. So of course we take one product line by one product line. There's central teams who are leading this, but of course we want to make it faster. And I think some area we have pocket of excellencies. Of course, Europe is always leading the way in many aspects, including in regulations. So that helps. But we are very good. I know we are best practices, but you feel like, okay, come on, let's do it faster, So yeah, I think that I would say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brett, I'm the CEO of Zuellig Pharma right now, in front of you. You can say anything you want. So tell me, Brett.
I think we've achieved a lot in a relatively short time, and we measure ourselves against global targets and the accreditations that we have. We're EcoVadis Platinum accredited. We look at the CDP ratings in the sectors of the business that we're looking at, and we're making progress. But this, the challenge persists, and we cannot afford to take our foot off the pedal with what we're doing. Innovation needs to continue, and we'll see that in the way that we build our facilities, the way that we build our distribution centres, the types of technologies that are used in those distribution centres. The packaging solutions will continue to evolve. We need to ensure that we're reducing product loss through quality-related issues, and I think we've done a great job in that space. But you can never take the pedal off. That's probably the message, that as much as we've achieved, the issues are there. The targets are becoming more aggressive. Our clients are becoming more aggressive with their targets. So if we want to stay ahead of the pack, we're going to have to keep running pretty fast.
Sure. So who is leading any sustainability initiatives in your organizations? I understand, Hélène, in your organization at Schneider Electric, there's a kind of top-down approach in the sense that the strategic direction, but then the entire organization is involved with the
Yes,
champions
everywhere.
to make sure that at every level, every function, you distill the sustainability mindset. But as well on your side, Brett, there are pockets of topics. So how do you make sure that there's a kind of consistency across the board? So is there someone who is leading or making sure that there's a kind of framework or umbrella to make it work? Or it's everyone has his target or objectives on sustainability and you're responsible to manage the impact on this perspective?
We do have a regional team. It's a small team, but it's a regional team and the leader of that team sits same level of management that I sit, so that's pretty senior in the organisation. And the strategies and the different areas that initiatives will be created come out of that office. The overall strategy for the organisation is also approved by the board. This is, as mentioned earlier, there's a sustainability subcommittee on the board. And then the implementation at market level is supported by specific resources in each market, but also partnering with some of the other functional areas. So, the quality and HSSE role that I lead also has a great support role for the market sustainability resources that we have. So that's kind of the framework for driving the overall strategy, but that is supported by some specific market initiatives. So people come up with ideas and can work with some of the different regulators and agencies that are supporting specific areas of sustainability. So landfill reduction targets and those types of things. We work with other organisations on that. They can be independent of the overall strategy, but we'll find how we can fit that into the umbrella of issues that we're looking at.
Okay. So how do you see I would call it the future of sustainability? I won't be specific to supply chain because in the end, most organizations, they have a fairly, especially in the industrial environment, they have a fairly, the scope of operation, the scope of supply chain is quite important in terms of the impact on sustainability. But how do you see the future of sustainability? Today, we are at certain stage and different stages depending on the maturity of the organization. But how do you see, specifically for your organization, this topic, let's call it this way, in your organization?
Okay, so I guess we have a very big number in front of us. We have to basically tap everywhere. So a distribution center by country, we touch on every different aspect in every single site. I don't know if you're familiar, but we have 5 sites that have been recognized by the World Economic Forum. So they are sustainable lighthouses. So we also have best practices, and we make sure that we have our employees seeing those practices and deploying them and scaling them as much as possible. So it's really celebrating the win, communicating about it, and making sure we're striving toward the direction we've committed to.
So it's more a matter of deploying what you've already done, probably at a smaller scale, which has already demonstrated some results.
Yes, exactly. And that goes back to your question before on what would you recommend but start with what you have in front of you, improve it, and then scale it. And then it's a long journey, but at least you can continue with celebrating the wins and making sure your teams are aware, trained, and continue toward that goal.
On your side, Brett, where do you see sustainability at Zuellig Pharma in the near future?
I think we've been tracking okay. I think that we need to. There's still a lot of scope for further improvements and further initiatives. I think a lot of that will come through collaboration. I think with our partners who are also on this journey, we need to learn from each other. I think that'll be the big game changer for how quickly or how slowly you get towards the targets that we've been set for 2025, 2030, 2050.
Which means for the NET podcast in 2025, you'll be here as well?
Possibly.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for both of you for this very insightful conversation. So I would like to thank our sponsor, Podster, for making this podcast possible. So thanks a lot for that. And as well, by making sure that you are on board to support such an important topic, which is sustainability in supply chain. And we also discovered it's not just about supply chain, it's everyone's, it should be on everyone's tables and desk in terms of priorities. So thanks a lot for coming today and joining this talk.
Thank you,
you.
Frederic.
Thanks, Alan.